Okay, welcome back. We talked a little bit about this triple scale hydrometer. I just wanted to put this on video so we can actually see it because we were zoomed out a little bit further before. So if we can zoom in on that. So this is our specific gravity scale. And if you rotate it once there, now we're on the brick scale. And we rotate it again, and there's your potential alcohol scale. So those are all three of those scales are on there, and they're all calibrated with each other automatically on this device. So if you wanted to, if somebody says I've got a Brix of such and such in my grapes, you can look, and if they said I have a Brix of say 23, you could look over here and go, oh, that's a specific gravity of like 1.095. Okay, so it's really easy to use this. So we're going to talk about also about pH meters today and how to use them, and then how to measure your total acidity in your grape must using a pH meter. So these are both going to be two practical demonstrations. So this is your basic cheapo pH meter, pH pen they call them. And this is, I keep this in a probe storage solution. The storage solution helps keep the electrode properly hydrated. And if you let them dry out, then they'll fail a lot earlier on you than if you don't. So if you keep them in here, this one's probably 10 years old, so they last a long time. These are about $20 or $30 online. They're not that expensive. So what the pH pen does is it measures, or pH meter, it measures the alkalinity of the wine, whether it's an alkaline or a base. It doesn't measure acid, but the alkaline of that wine is a reflection of the acidity. They work opposite of each other. So a high pH means low acid, and low pH means high acid. The power of a pH pen is to determine how much SO2 that we need in the wine to protect it. Now, if we zoom in on this chart here, this is a pH versus SO2 required on a graph. Now, we talked about how much sulfites to add into wines. Now, if you have a low pH, it needs, you can see here on the graph, you need very little sulfite in there in parts per million. Whereas if you had a higher pH of 3.6, which is sort of typical of what you're going to get in most of your wines, to properly protect that wine, you can see from that top graph, the line there, you need 50 parts per million of SO2 in there to protect it. There's two lines on that graph. You've got this in your book. The red line, that's the high side, and the blue line is the low side. Always add to the high side. So use the red line for your reference point based on what your pH is. Again, with the kits, it's not really that important, but when you start getting into fruits and grapes, it's really important that you get that pH in the right range. Now, as you add acid to that wine, if the pH is really high, it's going to bring that pH down into more of a usable range. If you had a pH of 4, you're going to need like 100 parts per million just to protect that wine. Sulfites are preservative, but the preservative only works as long as it's got to have the right amount of sulfites in there in relationship to the pH. So your kits your pH was already balanced for you already, but if you start making it out of fruit or out of grapes, that may not be balanced for you. Most grapes come in, they're fairly well controlled, but not always. If the grapes are overripe, then you're going to have some issues with your pH as well. So when you first get the grapes, you want to check the pH, and then you check your acid, and you want to get those two into the right kind of range. Now, if we look at the other chart that we have at the back of your winemaking log, that shows up on the top there. It shows the kind of the pH range that your white wine should be in. So the white wine should have a pH of about 3.2 to 3.3 typically. That's your starting window. Whereas your reds, your pH is 3.4 to 3.5. And then when you get into your acid levels, your white wine grapes, they're 0.75 to 0.95 TA, and the red is 0.75. So the whites are typically have a lower pH and a higher acid in them, and that's what we were saying. So it's a lower pH and a higher acid, and the reds tend to have a little bit lower acid and a higher pH. And then it gives Brix levels and everything else in there. But really the power of this chart is when we talked about how much SO2 we need, This is 1 gram of potassium metabisulfite is 0.56 gram, gives you 0.56 grams of SO2. Again, we're back into the formulas now. So if you're trying to determine how much sulfite you needed to add into that must to give you your 50 parts per million, you would have to add in how many the grams of potassium metabisulfite equals parts per million desired divided by 1,000 times the volume of the liters times 0.056. Or you make up in this graph here, you want to zoom in on this one here. If you need 50 parts per million, you just go down here. You want to add 50 parts per million of a 10% solution. The instructions are on the back of that, how to make a 10% solution. You follow that across. You've got a 23-liter carboy. You add 20.1 mils. No more math. It's math free. So that's the power of adding the liquids in there. It's easier to measure. And once it's made up, it's really simple to control it and add it. And you can add in smaller additions each time you rack. You might want to add in 25 parts per million. And again, you go back to that table and it tells you how many mils to add, depending on what container. If you've got a 19-liter container or a 1-gallon jug or a 55-gallon barrel of grape or oak barrel. So it's all in there. It's all done on that table. Any questions? Okay, so a pH pen isn't very good unless it's calibrated. And you have to calibrate these on a fairly regular basis. Usually if you do it at the beginning of your winemaking season, they're good for 3 or 4 months. But every 6 months, you should go through the recalibration process on it. Now, every pH pen is a little bit different. Some have automatic, like software calibrations on it where you tell it what solution you're in, you push a button and then it calibrates itself. Other ones have manual adjustments. This has manual adjustments on it. So I'm just going to go through. So whenever you pull it out of that solution, this is distilled water. So you rinse it in distilled water. There's 2 different calibration solutions. There's a calibration solution of pH of 4 and a pH of 7. Sometimes they'll have a pH buffer solution of 3. But this one I've got 4 and 7 because that's what this pen needs is 4 and 7. And it'll tell you on the top what it needs or in the instructions. So you turn this on. And if you get close to that, you can see the display there. So that is reading what, 6.1. That's just from the water. So we're going to put it in the 4 solution first. Whenever you're working with your buffer solutions, always put it into a separate container. And then when you're done, throw it out. Don't take this and put it back in there because if there's any contaminations on your probe, or if you get a little bit cross-contaminated too, now you've contaminated your calibration solution, then that's no good anymore. So always get some little small plastic containers and pour it in there. And then once you're finished with it, you dump it out. So you swirl it around, and this is reading 3.99. Okay, so this doesn't need any calibration. If it did, there's a screw on the top there, and that's my 4 adjustment. I would just put a little screwdriver in there and tweak it until it was bang on 4. Okay, so once you have that one done, and I just calibrated this one, so I know it shouldn't need it. Rinse it out in the distilled water again, shake it off, put it in the buffer solution for 7, and this should read 7. And if you zoom in on that, this one's reading 7.11. So it's a little bit out. So if I use a little screwdriver there, make sure I got the right one. Okay, there we got 7.00. Okay, so it's fully calibrated now. There's a little adjustment screws here. It's like little volume controls or their adjustment. So it changes the calibration factor inside there. One's the 4, one's the 7. Again, every pen is going to be a little bit different procedure, so you got to just read up on it when you buy one. And they're not that expensive, $30 or $40 on the internet. Okay. You made up that bottle with the... No, I bought this. You buy this. This bottle that probe sits in. You buy that solution as well. I just took a bottle and I drilled a hole in the top, and then I can stick this in there and it sits in there. Yeah, it's a homemade bottle. It's a homemade bottle, yeah. But it's called probe storage solution. Okay, and then you turn it off when you're done. So that's how you calibrate a pH pen. They aren't very much use unless they're calibrated. And you should have that. If you buy a pen, get the calibration solution too. It's not that expensive. And you can use, you can check it every time you use it, or every time, not every time you use it, every couple months you should check it. And if you're going to start making wine out of grapes, then you want to go at that point, do the calibration on it, and then it's good for a few months. Beginning, what you're doing is you want to make sure your acid and your pH are in proper balance for your yeast and for your fermentation. Then you, at that point, once you've done that, then once it's finished fermenting, then you want to you check it again, and that'll tell you how much sulfite you have to add, what the minimum amount is to protect it. Now, when you're adding sulfite, once you've added it, you can't just say, well, I've added 50, it's good. Because what happens, it gets bound up. So what we want is we want free SO2. And when we put 50 in there initially, that'll be 50 parts per million of free SO2. But then what'll happen eventually, it gets bound up and it'll settle out on the sediment. And now it's no longer free anymore. It's bound up and it's useless to you. So it's the free SO2 that protects your wine, not everything. So when you first add it in, you might add 50 in. And then if you check it a month later, the first time you add it in, it gets bound up pretty quickly. And then you could check it like a month later. When you check it a month later, you might be down to 5 or 10 parts per million if you checked it. So you have to add more in there. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a little quick break here. I'm going to get set up, and we're going to I'm going to show you how to do an acid testing using a pH pen. Okay, the question was asked by one of the students on why we worry about acid in the wine anyway. Why is acid and pH important? Well, we did talk about why pH is important, because that's for your SO2 additions, but the acid is important because it does affect the taste. Now, one of the students had made a wine and they brought it to the class tonight, and they're going, what did I do wrong? This wine doesn't taste right. Now, this wine has a little bit of bitterness in it. Now, usually if you get a wine that's bitter in the finish, specifically a white wine, it's because the acid is too low. So we have these acid test kits that I've made up for our wine judging. And I have a citric acid solution and a tartaric acid solution. So this is a 50 ml sample. And to make up these solutions, you would add 5 grams of citric acid into 100 ml of water. And this is a calibrated solution then. So what that happens then is 1 ml in 50 ml of wine equals 1 gram per liter when you're adding the addition. So this is a 3 ml syringe. So I am going to draw up 1 ml of solution in here, because 1 ml is, if you determine that the wine needs acid, it generally needs 1 ml of 1 gram per liter of acid additions. So I always recommend doing bench trials with this. So you'd have a base one of 50 mils wine here, another 50 mil, and another 50 mil, another 50 mil. This is your base one. Then you'd add 1 mil of this solution. So that's 1 gram per liter of citric acid. And then the next one would be 1.5, and then 2. And then you go through them and taste them and see which ones you like the best. So in this case here, we have 50 mils. I smell it. The aroma is okay, but it does have, when I tasted it, it's got that a little bit of bitterness in there. But the aromas don't really pop. Now, citric acid, even though it's citric acid, it's totally flavorless, and it has no aroma to it at all. But when you add it to the wine, it really increases your aromatics of that wine. I've added that in now. You swirl it around, and you don't have to wait at all. This instantly goes into the wine. And now my aroma has gone up by about 25%. And no more bitterness. So it's got nice acidity now. Low acid's going to come across as being a bit flat, similar to what you'd have with a pop. If you left it out overnight and you taste it the next day, it doesn't have that zip to it. That's because it's lost its carbonation. In this case, the wine, if it doesn't have enough acid, it's going to come across as being flat. So that's why acid is important in wine. It affects the flavor profiles, and it affects your end quality of your wine. And when we were talking about basic equipment, we talked about some of the basic stuff you needed. Then we talked about optional equipment that you could have. And in that optional equipment, we talked about having the 10 ml syringes. So the 10 ml syringes are good for adding in sulfite and stuff, but they're not really that accurate when we start doing this kind of a test. So these are called barrettes. So this is a 10 mil barrette. It's kind of hard to see the number, but that's 10 mil up to there. And that would be 1 mils down at the bottom. This is used for more precise measurement. It's like a little turkey baster. I have 2 of them. You can get, I got a set of 3 off of Amazon for 11 something. So they're not that expensive to buy there. They've got a little thing on here and you can take them apart. This comes off. I don't want to do that now because this comes off for cleaning purposes, and you should clean them after every time. What I've done is I've marked them with tape. I went and did this earlier on today to try to see how it would work. You can get fairly close with the syringes, but it's still not that accurate, whereas with these, when it's bang on. So I've created an 8 gram per liter of acid solution here. This is exact, it's been calibrated, and it's exactly 8 grams per liter. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the acid using the pH pen, using our sodium hydroxide solution, and we're using a titrant of 0.133 mole. That one, it comes in 0.1, 0.133, and 0.2. And I like the 0.133 because the math on it is really simple. So if you use a 10 ml sample of wine and you use for every milliliter of that solution, that titrant that you add, that equals 1 gram per liter. So there's no math on it. There are inside there is a sheet that's in the Google Drive for the online viewers. It tells you how to do the calibration and the conversion if you want to use different strength solutions. So if you're going to use the 0.1 solution, you'd use 7.5 mils of wine to it. And if you're going to use the 2, you'd use 15 mils of wine to it. And then it would still be the 1-to-1 ratio. So I mark them with tape so I don't get them mixed up, because if you have to do this multiple times, you don't want to get these mixed up between what you're using for wine and what you're using for the titrant. Okay. The titrant is a bit of a caustic solution, so you have to be a little bit careful around it. You want to, again, you never want to put whatever you're using, you never want to put this back into your calibrated solution. This is calibrated to be 0.133. So you put what you think you need into a small container, and then when you're finished with it, you just toss it out. So we're going to add a little bit into here. We need about 10 mils. The first thing we need to do is we need to pull up some of this solution here. And I didn't grab another container. So again, we'll do the same thing with this. So when you're setting this up, we need exactly 10 mils of wine. Now you can think of this as wine. This is our calibrated solution here. So I've gone past the 10 mark, which is right there. So what I want to do is I want to just squeeze a little bit out until I get back to that, exactly at that 10 mil mark. Okay. So I'm exactly at 10 mils. I add that 10 mils into my beaker. Now we can also add in some water to this. Now this is a fairly wide base, so there's not a lot of solution in there to cover up my pH pen probe. So I can add in water into here. Again, this water isn't that critical how much water we add, but we're going to add about 10 mils of water. Again, this part isn't critical. We don't have to really measure that. So this is my titrant here. And again, now I've marked that with a green piece of green tape. I want to pull up 10 mils of this solution into here. Okay. So I want to take it back down to exactly 10 mils. And the reason I want that is this 10 mils is going to be good for doing up to 10 grams per liter of acid, which is fairly high for wines. Most of your wines are going to be in the 7 or 8 range, or 6 to 8 range. So we have enough in there. We've got 10 mils in there. So that's my starting is 10 mils. Now, as I add this in here, Turn on my pH pen. I put that in there. My pH is reading 2.12. Now I know that this should be around 8, so I'm going to just speed this up. I'm going to put a fair bit in there to start with. So I'm at 3.85. What we're looking for is the magic number of 8.2. So now we have to go fairly slow, because just one drop is going to make a big difference. All right, 4.05. So our 2 level is right here. So that's, if it was exactly 8, that's what we should get down to the 2. At the end point on this, it goes along like that, and then it just boof, it hits 8.2. So it's almost impossible to get 8.25, but we're going to try to get as close to it as we can to it. Once you start getting close, it just takes one drop of putting you right over. Okay, so we're at 5 now, so we're getting really close to the end point. Once you get into the 5 and 6, you just add 1 or 2 drops at a time. And once it's over 6, it's just usually 1 drop away. Okay, we're at almost at 6 now. Okay, we are at 6. So it's just like 1 or 2 drops away from being finished here. Okay, so we went from 5.98 to 7.75 with 1 drop. So 1 more drop and it's going to take us past that end point. And there we just went from 7 to 9.45 with 1 drop. Okay, now when you look at here, we are exactly at 2, okay, on the burette. So that means that we did in fact measure, we used up 8 mils of this. So it is 8 grams per liter of solution. And that's what this test tells us. And that's what our solution was 8 grams. So it's actually very accurate how you can do it. So even just one line on that would be a difference between 8 and 8.2. Now, even if it's 0.2, that's still accurate enough for what we want to do for winemaking. If our acid, if you were looking for an acid of 7.5 and you got an acid of 7.3, you're going to go, yeah, it's close enough. So again, the procedure on how to do that is in your book, and it's also online for our online viewers. It's under the Google Drive link, and it's in the direction, or in the description at the bottom of our video. If you click on that, there's links to our organization. There's links to the that folder, that Google Drive folder. And if you have any other questions, you can actually leave them in comments and we'll try to answer them. So thank you for watching. That completes session 4, our practical session. And our next session is going to be session 5, and that's where we're actually going to bottle the wines. So stay tuned.
And bench test.
And do some bench testing. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching.